My name is Jacqueline, and at 30 years old, I never imagined I would be standing in a billionaire's dining room while being called street garbage. As my boyfriend Alexander squeezed my hand under the table, his father Maxwell stared at me with cold, calculating eyes. 23 wealthy guests froze in shock as he snorted street garbage in a borrowed dress loud enough for everyone to hear. My blood turned to ice, but something unexpected happened inside me. Before I tell you my reaction, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe to see the next part of the story of how I stood up for my dignity. I met Alexander 7 months before that fateful dinner. I was working at Maple Street Cafe, a small coffee shop near the financial district in Boston. The pay was modest, but the flexible hours allowed me to attend evening classes for my graphic design degree. Every morning, at precisely 7:30, he would come and order a black coffee with 1 sugar and sit by the window with his laptop. Unlike the other suited executives, who barely looked up from their phones when ordering, Alexander always made eye contact, said please and thank you, and left a generous tip. He had kind, blue eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and he never seemed rushed or stressed like the others. "You must really like our coffee," I teased one morning, after he had been coming in for about 3 weeks straight. He looked up from his laptop and smiled. "Actually, it is good coffee, but I also enjoy the atmosphere and the service." The way he said it, holding my gaze a second longer than necessary, made my cheeks flush. I learned his name was Alexander Blackwood when I had to call it out for his order. He started staying longer sometimes, asking me questions during my breaks. Where was I from originally? What brought me to Boston? What did I do besides work at the cafe? I told him I grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to support us. After high school, I moved to Boston with dreams of becoming a graphic designer, taking classes at night while working full-time. I never mentioned how I sometimes had to choose between buying textbooks or paying my electricity bill. "That takes incredible determination," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Most people I know had everything handed to them, including me if I am being honest." That was the first hint that Alexander came from money, though he never flaunted it. He dressed well, but not ostentatiously. His watch was expensive, but not flashy. He drove a nice car, but not the kind that screamed new money. It was only after a month of our coffee counter conversations that he finally asked me to dinner. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant, nothing too fancy but definitely nicer than anywhere I would go on my own budget. The conversation flowed easily. Alexander was intelligent but humble, interested in art and literature as well as business. "My family runs Blackwood Industries," he explained, when I asked about his work. "I am in the investment division, but honestly, I would rather start something of my own someday. Something that makes a real difference." I had never heard of Blackwood Industries, but I nodded politely. It was only later that night, after a magical evening where we talked until the restaurant closed, that I looked up his family name. My stomach dropped when I realized Alexander was the son of Maxwell Blackwood, the billionaire industrialist whose face occasionally appeared on business magazines. I almost canceled our second date, convinced we lived in completely different worlds. But Alexander called the next day, his voice warm and sincere, as he told me how much he had enjoyed our evening together. Against my better judgment, I agreed to see him again. Over the next 6 months, our relationship deepened. Alexander never made me feel less than him because of my background. He was just as happy eating at my favorite diner as he was taking me to upscale restaurants. He showed genuine interest in my graphic design projects, even offering to connect me with the marketing department at his company. "You have real talent, Jacqueline," he would say, looking over my portfolio. Any company would be lucky to have you. When he first told me he loved me, we were walking along the Charles River at sunset. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts, just a simple, heartfelt declaration as we watched the fading light reflect off the water. I realized then that I loved him too, not because of his family name or wealth, but because of his kindness, his integrity, and the way he made me feel valued. Of course, there were moments that highlighted our different backgrounds, like when he casually mentioned skiing in the Alps as a child, or when he did not understand why I was so excited about a $50 bonus at work. But Alexander always listened and learned. He never made me feel ashamed of where I came from or who I was. For 6 beautiful months, we existed in our own bubble, largely separate from his family and the world of extreme wealth he came from. We built our relationship on shared values and genuine connection. I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, our different worlds would not matter in the end. I had no idea how wrong I was or how cruelly reality would shatter that illusion on the night I finally met his family. The invitation came on a rainy Tuesday evening in April. Alexander and I were cuddled on my worn sofa, in my tiny apartment sharing takeout, and watching an old movie when he suddenly paused the screen. "My grandparents are celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary next month," he said, his fingers lightly tracing patterns on my arm. "There is going to be a formal dinner at the family estate. I would really like you to come with me." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Your family estate? You mean meet your entire family?" Alexander nodded, his expression a mix of hopefulness and something else. "Anxiety, perhaps. It is a big deal, I know. But we have been together for 6 months, and you are important to me. I want them to meet you." "Will there be many people there?" I asked already, feeling my stomach tighten with apprehension. "About 30 guests. Mostly family, some close friends of my grandparents, a few business associates." He squeezed my hand. "I know it sounds intimidating, but they will love you, Jacqueline. How could they not?" His confidence was touching, but did little to calm my nerves. For the next 3 weeks, I obsessed over every detail. What would I wear? How should I speak? What if I used the wrong fork or said something embarrassing? My best friend Sophia listened patiently to my concerns over coffee the following Sunday. "You need a killer dress," she declared. "Something that makes you feel confident." We spent the entire afternoon combing through department stores. But everything suitable for such an event was far beyond my budget. $400 for a dress I would wear once seemed insane when that amount represented half my rent. Seeing my dismay, Sophia offered a solution. "I still have that midnight blue silk gown from my cousin's wedding last year. It would fit you perfectly with a few minor adjustments." "I cannot borrow your dress," I protested weakly, though relief was already washing over me. "Of course you can. And my pearl earrings too. You will look stunning." The week before the dinner, I practiced walking in heels around my apartment. I watched YouTube videos on formal dining etiquette, memorizing which utensil to use for each course. I researched the Blackwood family history, so I could make intelligent conversation about their business interests. The night before the event, my sister Elaine called. She had always been my rock, the one who helped raise me after our father left. "Just remember who you are," she said firmly. "You are smart, kind, and worthy of respect, regardless of how much money anyone has. Do not let anyone make you feel small." I clung to her words as I prepared the next evening, taking extra care with my hair and makeup. The borrowed dress fit beautifully, the dark blue material flowing elegantly to the floor. Sophia's pearl earrings added a touch of classic sophistication. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. When Alexander arrived to pick me up, his expression made all the anxiety worth it. "You look absolutely breathtaking," he whispered, kissing me softly. His car, usually modest by his standards, had been replaced with a sleek black luxury sedan driven by a chauffeur. As we settled into the plush leather seats, Alexander sensed my nervousness. "They are just people, Jacqueline," he said, taking my hand. "Wealthy people, yes, but still just people with their own insecurities and flaws. Just be your wonderful self." The drive took us through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, until we turned onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees. As the Blackwood estate came into view, my mouth went dry. It was not just a house, but a mansion that looked like it belonged in a period drama, complete with manicured gardens and a circular driveway where valets waited to park arriving vehicles. "You grew up here," I whispered, unable to hide my awe. Alexander nodded, a slightly embarrassed smile on his face. "Home sweet home. Ready?" As the car stopped at the entrance, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of my sister's words. I was worthy of respect. I belonged here. But as we stepped out, and the enormous double doors opened to reveal the opulence within, I could not shake the feeling that I was walking into the lion's den. The Blackwood Mansion's grand foyer took my breath away. A crystal chandelier larger than my entire apartment hung from a ceiling painted with Renaissance-style clouds and cherubs. Marble floors gleamed beneath our feet, and a sweeping staircase curved majestically to the upper floors. The air smelled of fresh flowers and expensive perfume. Impeccably dressed staff moved silently among the arriving guests, collecting coats and offering flutes of champagne on silver trays. I accepted one gratefully, needing something to calm my nerves and occupy my hands. "Alexander, darling." A tall, elegant woman in her 50s approached us. Her silver blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. She air-kissed both his cheeks before turning her cool blue eyes to me. "And you must be Jacqueline." "Mother, this is Jacqueline Miller," Alexander said, his hand reassuring on the small of my back. "Jacqueline, my mother, Evelyn Blackwood." I extended my hand. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Blackwood. Thank you for including me in this special celebration." Her handshake was brief and formal. "Of course, Alexander has mentioned you." The slight emphasis on "mentioned" made it clear I had been a topic of limited discussion. What a lovely dress. Such an interesting color choice for a spring event. Before I could respond to what was clearly a subtle critique, a younger woman bounded up to us, her warm smile, a stark contrast to her mother's restrained greeting. "Finally, I have been dying to meet the woman who got my brother to stop bringing those insufferable socialites to family events." She hugged me without hesitation. "I am Victoria, the cooler Blackwood sibling." Alexander laughed. "My sister lacks my mother's gift for subtlety." Victoria linked her arm through mine. "Come on. I will introduce you to people who actually know how to smile. Most of them, anyway." As we moved through the crowd, I became acutely aware of the appraising glances. Victoria introduced me to cousins, family, friends, and business associates, most of whom were polite if somewhat reserved. The questions began innocuously enough. "And what do you do?" Jacqueline asked an older woman, dripping in diamonds. "I work at a coffee shop in the financial district while finishing my degree in graphic design," I answered honestly. "How quaint," she replied, her smile not reaching her eyes. "A barista. How did you and Alexander meet?" Each time I explained our coffee shop meeting, I watched the subtle shifts in expression, raised eyebrows, exchanged glances, thin smiles. The unspoken judgment was palpable. "Oh, I just love those rags to riches stories," gushed one woman, as if I were a character from a Dickens novel rather than a person standing right in front of her. "Alexander always did have a charitable heart," murmured another, just loudly enough for me to hear. Victoria squeezed my arm supportively. Ignore them. They are just jealous because you have actual personality and do not bleed blue. We eventually made our way to Alexander's grandparents, the guests of honor. I had expected more of the same thinly veiled condescension, but Henry and Eleanor Blackwood surprised me with their warmth. "So you are the young lady who has put such a genuine smile on our grandson's face," Henry said, clasping my hand between both of his. "Wonderful to meet you, my dear." "Alexander tells us you are studying design," Eleanor added. "I would love to hear about your projects sometime." Their kindness was a momentary respite from the scrutiny, but as we moved away, Victoria leaned in to whisper, "Grandpa and Grandma are the best of the bunch. They came from nothing and built the company themselves. The rest of us just got lucky in the genetic lottery." As the evening progressed, I managed a few pleasant conversations. A young cousin of Alexander's who was studying art history, an elderly aunt who had traveled extensively and loved hearing about my small hometown, a business partner of the family who seemed genuinely interested in graphic design. But for every friendly interaction, there were 3 or 4 that left me feeling examined and found wanting. Comments about my accent, subtle digs about my education questions, that probed at my family background as if searching for something scandalous. Through it all, Alexander remained attentive, his hand rarely leaving mine stepping in when conversations became too pointed. But even he could not shield me from the moment I had been dreading most. "There is my father," Alexander said, quietly nodding toward a distinguished-looking man holding court across the room. Maxwell Blackwood was tall and imposing with steel-gray hair and Alexander's blue eyes, though his held none of his son's warmth. "Should we go say hello?" I asked, though every instinct told me to avoid this man. Alexander hesitated. "We should, just. He can be abrupt. Do not take anything personally."